I'd like to ask Mr. Gary Jones and Superintendent White if they'll come to the table, and I'll do my opening remarks from here. So the MFP formula is sent to us by the Bessie board, who develops the formula. The formula is put into a resolution, which today is SCR number 3. There are 3 main things that this year's resolution does that are different from last year's. We're increasing the base per pupil amount from $3,961 to $4,015, or an increase of 1.375%. It provides across-the-board increases of $1,000 for classroom teachers and certificated personnel. It provides across-the-board increase of $500 for non-certificated school personnel. It all does some, removes a whole harmless provisions, that's minor, and provides funding for the University of Louisiana Lafayette Lab School, which is yet to start up. So there's no funding basis there, but the first 3 are the main issues. And so to discuss that, I'll invite the president of the Bessie Board who sent us the formula, Dr. Gary Jones, to begin the conversation.
Good morning, Chairman Morrish and esteemed members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here before you today, and I would like to note that I'm joined at the table by 2 people, State Superintendent John White and the person that has all the knowledge of the dollars, Beth C&O. And I asked both of them to come to the table because I don't pretend to have the command of depth on detail that Superintendent White has, nor do I have the technical knowledge of how the dollars are spent that Beth C&O has. So I will attempt to answer any questions that the board might ask, but I've instructed both of them that if my answer is incomplete or inaccurate, to feel free to amend my comments, and I will buy whatever they say. So I think your summation explains it pretty well. There's a modest increase of about $54, and to my knowledge, that's the first increase to the base per pupil amount in the last 10 years, and it's not very much. But several years ago, we had instituted a provision of adding an annual increase of 2.75% to take care of inflation and adjusted costs on unfunded accrued liability and a bunch of the other things that go with it. But we've never been able to put that in, and this year we even with the increased funds apparently available to the state this year, we didn't feel it was appropriate to go for the 2.75%. But this MFP was put together not by Bessie in a vacuum. It was put together by an MFP task force that had a broad cross-section of the community participate. It was adopted near unanimously, and the one person that didn't vote for its adoption was Superintendent White, but his reason for not voting for it was to get more recognition about the problem we have with early childhood, and I agree with that. I just think we put together a really good MFP for you, and at that I'll stop and respond to any questions you or your members might have.
And I do have a question from Senator Rappel.
Thank you, and perhaps you're going to defer to one of your folks, but I have the fiscal note. Mm-hmm. And have you had an opportunity to look at it?
I did. I didn't look at it this morning, but I have looked at it.
I don't think it's changed. I mean, this is not new, is it?
No.
Y'all? According to the fiscal note, the House bill, which is what we're going to be working with in finance, is $38.9 million short of fully funding the MFP. And to that, I've heard the governor say that he wants to spend $8.8 million on early childhood and $13 million on another early childhood program, which is another 22. So that would put us, if we were to fund the early childhood programs, it's going to put us about $60 million in the hole. So what is Bessie's thinking about sending an MFP resolution that's potentially $60 million short? I'm just.
And I'm going to attempt to answer, but I'm going to ask either one of these to add.
Yeah, I thought you might.
Essentially, at the time that Bessie prepared that formula, we prepared that formula under the best guidance that we had, information coming out from the governor's office as to what they thought was available and so
I understand.
forth. We obviously, our responsibility is to give you a good MFP formula that supports the educational needs of the kids of Louisiana. And to be completely honest, our emphasis is on what it takes to do that, not the issue about the appropriations. But I do think at some point, your appropriations group will decide what the money is and where it is, and you know, we obviously are guided by what comes back to us on those things. We just feel like that what we put out there for you is the appropriate cost of educating the children of Louisiana.
Well, let me ask you a question. Did this MFP, the action you guys took, did that occur before or after the REC meeting, the last REC meeting, or do you know?
I think it was before the
Before.
last
Yeah,
one.
that's what I
believe
thought.
so. Yeah,
Because as you recall, that meeting recognized, well, it had about a $20 million less than what probably your MFP is based on, just that meeting.
Right.
The House is saying it's 40. And
Senator Pell, the Bessie formula was adopted on March the 13th of '09. I don't know when the REC.
Yeah, I don't either. That's why. But I'm thinking that they did it before.
I remember
REC.
hearing all the discussions back and forth, but it would be hard for me to figure out whether that was before or after the last one.
Now, I understand that you guys are meeting. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Senator, if I
please.
may, I believe that the guidance that Bessie had at the time.
I'm
when
sorry,
it was-
Superintendent White,
I
but you
apologize,
need to
Senator.
identify
Thank you.
yourself.
I apologize, Chairman. John White.
I think
from
we
the
all know who
department.
you are, but if you would, for the record.
For the record, John White, Department of Education. The Bessie Board's guidance at that point was the proposal that had been introduced by the governor
I thought.
to the Joint Committee.
Right.
It
That was the
not-
20 million more
Yes,
than the
sir.
REC.
It was, yes, and it was also not Representative Henry's budget bill, which the number of which I'm forgetting, but
38.5 difference.
correct, and maybe it was 51 or whatever the House bill is. So the bill that Appropriations has heard on the House side is not the same amount as would be generated by the formula that Bessie sent. But Bessie was sending that in the context of
The original.
what they knew was the governor's
And
proposal.
also this 22 million for early childhood would, of course, it's not in the MFP, but it has to be funded. So,
Yes, and I mean, there have been a lot of numbers discussed, but first of all, I thank the governor's office for inserting the idea of trying to make up for a shortfall. What they have the governor has introduced is the notion of trying to make up for the loss of a federal grant that we're expecting, which would mean basically a loss of pre-K and child care slots.
that's the 8.8 million.
Yes, sir, correct. As I appreciated that, what they have proposed is their support of an amendment in the House amending process to Representative Henry's bill next week.
Okay.
And I don't know the specific funding
No, I
sources for the
understand.
8.8. Yeah.
Well, my understanding is that bill is supposed to be voted out of committee on Monday.
Yes, sir.
And then get to the floor of the House later in the week.
Yes.
So, yes, sir.
I was just going to say, I think it's worthy of note that Bessie, going into this process this year, was in a unique position that it hasn't been in years. Certainly hasn't been in since I've been on the board. Every other year, we've had information ahead of time that there was no point in doing anything other than trying to hold it like it was. Okay. This year, it was obvious that there was some funds that were going to be available. We just don't know the amount. But the difference this year is that for the first time ever, we've been able to consider some of those things that appropriately should have been in there all along. For example, school districts don't get monies in the MFP for capital construction, deferred maintenance, transportation, all those things that in many other states that are included as a separate piece of it. We don't get that. So, and then we have a requirement also, and it's a good requirement, that 70% of the MFP dollar needs to be spent on instructional issues, which means 30% for all the discretionary things. That's why if you look at most districts, they do deferred maintenance all the way till they get to the point where they can't do deferred maintenance anymore, and then they go out and try to pass a capital bond issue to renovate or construct new facilities. And that's all for about the last 7-8 years, we've been dealing with a level playing field. We've not had any opportunity to appropriately give those districts what they should have.
Well, I've got two more questions, and I'm going to shut up. But Bessie's meeting, I understand, on Tuesday.
Yes.
Now, is there going to be an effort by Bessie to align another MFP formula closer to the amount of funds it seems to be available?
Well, there's going to be a discussion on Tuesday, and a lot of that depends on what this committee does today, where it goes from here to the floor and so forth. At this point, the issue is still pretty cloudy for us, and so we're somewhat limited by what we'll be able to accomplish on Tuesday. But we're going to look at all options. We always have to deal with the reality of what's there, and so at the end of the day, I think by closer to the end of the session, you'll have a clearer picture, we'll have a clearer picture, and obviously
I think it's fair to say we know we're 20 million short, and it's fair to say that the governor has proposed another 22 million for early childhood, which I appreciate. It's very important. So I guess hopefully the governor's folks will come to the table later. But I mean, clearly something will not get funded. Now, if you go by Henry's proposal, that's another 20 million. So somewhere between 20 and 60 million short to fund your MFP.
Yes, sir.
And I'm just wondering, why wouldn't Bessie then make at least an attempt to get to within the 20 that we all know is short, unless the governor intends to make substantial cuts in other services.
Right.
Because, I mean, you can't make money that doesn't exist.
Well, I certainly wouldn't presume to speak for the governor
Oh, I
or
understand that. And I'm not
his
asking
staff
you to.
on that. What I would say is that the picture's not real clear right now. I mean, we hear different numbers every day. I think that initially, in the past, it's been very, very obvious, very clear. They've told us there's no money there, so don't even put anything in there. And then they've said, okay, we're sending it back to you to do this or to do that, and we understand what that is. This year is a little different, and so I'm not sure that by Tuesday it will be clear enough for us to take an action. But once again, I facilitate the discussion. I don't make the decision for
The
Bessie.
problem is if we pass this out at this level, and then there is no second one, and then there's no funding, because this has got to go to finance, the floor, appropriations, and back to the floor over there, then we have no MFP. We have no teacher pay raise. That's the problem.
Well,
And,
yes, sir. I can respond to
so-
that a
yeah,
little bit.
please.
There's a statute that I've come across, 39.32.2, I believe, that lays out the procedure for y'all to actually return to Bessie. That's not the procedure that's been followed to this point. So I'm unclear as to whether or not anything has actually been done to return to Bessie that would require Bessie to take an action. So I think y'all might want to look at that particular statute.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
I
What is
can-
it? No, don't read it. Just tell us.
Well,
and
what it says
paraphrase
is that the procedure, and it was passed in 2003, and it was passed, y'all as an act, that required that the procedure for returning a MFP formula to Bessie for reconsideration is after a vote of a majority of the Senate and a majority of the House. It doesn't say anything about one committee returning.
I see what you're saying.
And so the point there is, it's really not clear where we are in the process. Now,
But I guess I'm diverging from where I was going. But my point is, if we stick with this MFP and we pass it out of here today and it goes on down the chain, and then we get to Finance Committee, we get to Appropriations, and we discover that there's 20 million short or 40 million short or whatever it is, your MFP will get killed because there's no money to fund it, and we'll have no teacher pay raise. That's my
respectfully,
concern.
sir, I would suggest to you that if you follow the procedure that's called in the law, you will, at that point, when it's obvious to us, you will return it to us.
We won't have time.
Well,
We're going to run out
we'll-
of time.
Well, I mean, we'll have time. We can respond in one day.
I know, but we got to go through committees and houses. I mean, you got two committees in the Senate, 2 committees in the House, and floor and both, and it's a serious time constraint that
I understand. And
Bessie, if y'all maintain this and we don't have the money, and I'm not disagreeing with you that it's in flux.
Right.
I'm just saying and I mean I'm pretty confident we don't have 20 million of it. Then the whole thing could blow up. So it's a caution. You're
we
going to be
understand,
running a risk.
and I can assure you, I've already so some other folks. I'm going to ask everyone that testifies at our meeting on Tuesday whether or not they understand the risk and whether or not they're prepared to take those risks.
Okay, as long as y'all
I'm not gonna
understand the
operate in a
circumstance,
vacuum
because
and,
the clock's running, I'm looking at it, tick, 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 and
we
we all
understand.
want to give the teacher pay raise. There's not even a question about it.
And I agree.
But
and I don't
if there's
want,
not enough money to do the rest of it, it could blow up the whole thing.
and I will assure the committee that if you go through the process as it is, we will respond appropriately and in a timely manner to make sure that we don't leave this legislative session without a teacher pay raise, because I think we all have the same objective. Nobody wants credit for killing a teacher pay raise. So, we certainly don't.
Okay, that's all I had, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pell. Senator Boudreaux?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your continued leadership in this area, and I really appreciate your comments as it relates to, you not being clear on where things are going. It's clear where things are going. Okay, we've been playing around with this. Nobody wants to kill teacher pay raise, but we sat through REC since December talking about all of the things that can kill it. Okay, the problem was early childhood. The superintendent pointed that out, and I think the governor's office has responded. So now the ball's back in our court. We got to find the dollars to make that work. Now, yeah, there's going to have to be some cuts, but we're about to squander a great opportunity. As you said, serving when they tell you can't do anything is not fun. It's like sitting on this side and there are no capital projects that I can take back home and do something with. But here we have an opportunity, the first time in 10 years, to do something positive. And again, it's clear to me that while we say we want to do some positive things, the clock is running, but it's been running. It was running last year. We knew the economic forecast. We knew what was going to be there. So I appreciate your response that you can turn around in one day. We're going to have to set up some special committee meetings. We're going to have to do some things that we haven't done if we really and truly want to make this happen. So I know you guys are meeting on Tuesday. We line them up. Again, for the first time in 10 years, we have an opportunity to do something. I mean, we got to get ahead of this thing. And while the clock is running, we got teachers that are finishing up a school year this month, and there's some. It's not clear to them where we're going. It's not clear to our support staff where we're going. And if we were talking about $10,000 raises like some of the other states are talking about, I can understand why we would have delays and we put all these roadblocks in the middle of it, and we talk about this and talk about that while the clock is ticking. We're talking about $1,000 and then $500 for our support staff. First time in 10 years. It's an easy vote for me. And in fact, I'm disappointed that it's not more. But if we can take this first step, if we can tell our teachers, if we could tell our support staff for the first time in 10 years that we can do something positive, I want to be on that side of the equation. Now, with all due respect to the structure and everything else, yeah, we have to follow that. But this should be the warning light that there are a lot of days where there's some time that could be put into getting everybody together and moving this needle so that at the end of the session, we can all leave here proud, And one of my biggest hangups is this pride of authorship. It doesn't have to have my name on it. This is for the working people in this state, our teachers, and our support staff. We talk about our school districts and we talk about all the stakeholders. I attended several of those meetings of those stakeholder groups when we were talking about this. While I was disappointed with the turnout, I know where their passion is. They don't want to get into this political process. They want to go to school. They want to go to work. They want to produce some good young citizens, and that's where they want to go. But they don't want to go to these meetings. I'm here today to say they got to come out. They got to do what they have to do. Their voice has to be heard. We've been nice and we've been quiet, but that clock's been running and people are playing games. People are playing games.
If I may add to that, the NEA this week released a national study of the pay gap between Louisiana teachers and other teachers, and it's significant. If I remember the statistic, and I didn't review it again, but I think the average teacher in Louisiana, someone with at least a 4-year college degree, in many cases with 6 or 8 years worth of college education, the average salary is $50,000. I don't know of any other profession that has that degree of educational expertise that is able to employ dedicated people for $50,000. So $1,000 raise makes it 51. It's not like it's doing a major overhaul.
Yeah, and then finally, as far as this part, we wonder why people don't want to stay in the classroom, and we wonder why we can't get our young people to get into education, and it's because of these situations like this, where we don't take opportunities to promote that. And as you said, we're gonna go from 50,000 to 51,000. Wow, that's we shouldn't be, and we want to move education up, and it's gonna start with those people, but. That's why we don't have the 30-year career school teachers. They're not staying in. So thank you. Hold fast. Ray Charles can see what's going on, and a lot of people in the state can see also. So let's stick to it. And I appreciate your leadership. Next week's meeting will be pivotal, but there are a lot of meetings in the meantime that we need our teachers and our support staff to pick up the phone and call people. This is important. This is probably our last bite of the apple. If we don't get it right this time, we're going to stay where we are. Thank you,
and
sir.
I'll certainly extend an invitation to any of you that would like to speak at that meeting on Tuesday, and I'll put you at the top of the list at the front of the table and give you as much time as you want to express your thing, because I want an informed decision to come out of Bessie. I'm not running for re-election. I've got no axes to grind, no issues to do it. What I want is what's the same thing that the rest of Bessie wants and that Superintendent White wants, which is the best educational opportunity for the kids.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Boudreaux. Senator Walsworth for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's all been about, Dr. Jones, you and I have gone way back for a long time. It seems to be all about one thing, and that's teacher pay raise. And we had some discussions, lengthy discussions yesterday with the governor's office and others. Our rhetoric over the last 6 months has been one thing. Teachers will get a $1,000 pay raise. In this MFP, not all public school teachers will get a raise. You've got teachers in the schools that are in the same faculty members that 90% of the regular teachers are, but they're being left out because the MFP, by having the pay raise inside the MFP, it is K through 12 only. MFP is K through 12 only, constitutionally. If you're a pre-K teacher, you're out. You cannot get paid by the MFP with this pay raise. It's my understanding that it would take, of course, I keep hearing that if we do the 1.375 and give the districts this extra money, that they can pay their teachers. That's not fair to the districts. We're the ones who have had the rhetoric that said all teachers will get paid $1,000. We're the ones that said the rhetoric that all support personnel will get paid $500. We're the ones who started the rhetoric, not the unions, not anybody else. We ought to live up to our rhetoric, and what I'm asking for is where we're going to find the $2 million to pay the teachers and the support personnel that are not included in the MFP. Can you?
Yes, sir, I can respond to that. Actually, my research of it, I looked and spoke with the lady that, I can't remember her name, that's the expert on the funding codes and all that. I believe that the MFP we sent over does include the pre-K. We looked at the accounting codes listed in it, and it does include the pre-K. Now, that's not to say that there are other teachers in a district who are not funded in the MFP. They're coming out federal funds and so forth. Normally, districts, if they have enough money left in their funds to adjust it, they just to do that. But I personally talked to every superintendent, and I've been a superintendent for 15 years, and I can tell you this. That is why that 1.375 needs to be there, because they will pay it. There's not a single superintendent that I've talked to, and I've talked to most of them, who has any teacher on their staff who does not get whatever pay raise everybody else gets. But let me point out something else to you that's also critically important. There's another statute that says whatever you paid a teacher last year, you got to pay them next year. So it needs to be in the formula, because that becomes an obligation to that district that they got to have from then on. And so that 1.375 helps them make sure that they have the ability to do that. And so that's why we think, and that's why we think it's critical that it be there, and we hope you find a way to fund it. Obviously, we also deal with the reality of the message that comes back to us.
So are you saying that some MFP dollars are being used outside of the K through 12?
What I'm saying is that according to what I talked with the lady, and y'all know who it is. I don't know who the lady is, but she told me that that in the MFP that went over that those were in there. Beth, you might be ready to add a little more.
Beth Ciano with the department.
Go ahead, Beth.
So the
Beth,
data.
identify yourself, please.
Beth Ciano with the Department of Education. So the data on which the pay raise is based, we've tried to make clear is preliminary data. That data is self-reported by the districts. And unbeknownst to them, when they reported that information to us, there could be some inaccuracies in there or just, things that weren't perfect. That is the primary reason why that is considered a preliminary estimate. There are some codes in the calculations right now that probably do include some pre-K teachers, although I'm very comfortable with the K through 12 codes that are in there. Pre-K and preschool teachers are not coded correctly as far as we can tell. So they're, despite the fact.
Beth, are not coded correctly in the current formula that Bessie sent us?
No, well, it's data. In other words, to estimate the pay raise, you got to go to the latest available data that you have, which is an enormous lift on the part of all the LEAs that submitted. It's not something taken lightly, but there is some inconsistencies, perhaps on the part of the department in giving out maybe very specific instructions for pre-K, but we're seeing some inconsistencies. So there is some information in there that we are going to deliver some instructions to the LEAs in the next 6 weeks. So when they submit the information to us in October, they will give us the accurate information. So as far as the pre-K teachers, there could be codes in there, but we did not want to make any assumptions and kick those out or add things we weren't secure about. So, that is not the final cost of the pay raise. Let me just say that. It is a preliminary estimate. It could well cost more in the fall because there are more teachers across the board in K through 12. So the amount.
Let me stop. Which is not unusual.
Oh,
I mean,
it's
we
not
do that
unusual.
every year.
Well, in the past, we've always done it that way. There's always been some declines in districts who have declining student populations.
If I don't ask you, I'll forget. And even if we went back to the prior year's formula, there have been times when it has cost us more money because of the
absolutely.
change.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
by the way, I don't want to take Senator Walsworth thunder, but I am concerned as he is about saying, that all teachers are getting a pay raise or certificated teachers. So, and I think, as we talk about dollars and cents, I mean, we want to be, I agree with him that we want to be sure when who we're talking about here and that they are included in this formula. And if not, find a way to include them through some other possible means.
And it would be my recommendation that the money that is in the formula is likely to be eaten up by the change in the K through 12 data in the fall. If perhaps there was any savings, MFP, besides this year, has always cost a little more. So I would say that there is no cash that I can say for sure in the MFP that is extra that can go towards pre-K. And I would ask that you consider, calculating something that could be done outside of the formula for pre-K, because at this point I'm really concerned that whatever little bit of cash, we're talking $500,000, whatever it might be, in the formula will be eaten up by those districts who will have increased numbers of teachers and support workers in the formula.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add to that, I think that Ms. Ciano is right in speaking Ms. Ciano is speaking from the perspective of budgeting, and given the size of the appropriation, will the size of the appropriation be large enough to include pre-K teachers? I think that I don't want to contradict what Dr. Jones said, because I think that he is right that in the estimates we have been going back and forth with legislative staff on, inevitably there are pre-K teachers in those estimates. However, as I read the formula is driven by the K through 12 count. It is for elementary and secondary education, and to date, it has not been the policy of the board or the legislature to appropriate monies for elementary schools that include pre-kindergarten. We have a separate program for that. It's LA4. And so LA4 dollars are what you appropriate, Beth, whatever it is, $75 million a year, is what you appropriate to fund the salaries of pre-K teachers. Now, you also appropriate Title I, 8G, all of these other funds. I think there is at best ambiguity as to whether or not LA4 teachers are included in this pay raise. I think at worst they are simply not included in the pay raise, and that if you really said to the districts, the guidance is that teachers of K through 12 education, which is what's covered by the MFP, are the ones to get a raise. And we want to know, as of October 1, who is teaching K and who is teaching pre-K. Those folks would not be included in that raise. Now, as Dr. Jones mentions, there's a million other ways those raises can be provided, and I have all confidence, as he said, that the superintendents would do so. However, Senator Walsworth, I understand your perspective, which is that we have said that the state wants to do a raise as an addition to what would be done locally. And I do think that to assure that that is done, the legislature would have to do something in addition to simply approving this MFP.
Here's where I'm at. We're in a dangerous side here that if we can, quote unquote, some districts code things that are to allow, by code, to allow teachers to get something that they probably wouldn't have in other districts, that's a dangerous thing. Second of all, what is really more dangerous is if we're saying that it is now the policy of this state that MFP funds can go into other areas besides K through 12. And that's, Dr. Jones, is where I'm the most concerned about it all. I think we can find $2 million.
Okay, and I hope you do.
But I'm concerned that we're going down a road that says, it's no big deal. Code is a code. Teacher's a teacher. No big deal. We're setting ourselves up that if you did it in last week, why can't we do it tomorrow? And that's what I'm concerned about, is that, go ahead.
Okay, well, what I'm going to say, two things that are really critical here. One, this is an estimate of what the cost and so forth is. This is not a factual under any consideration. The point I made was that in my research on it, I've discovered or was informed that those codes were in that amount. So what I'm trying to tell you is that number that was generated by that included. Now, I'm not saying that it would be legal for the MFP money to be spent on those people. I'm just telling you that the money that was set aside there included data from those. Okay, but the big point is that all of this is an exercise in guessmanship, because our October 1 child count is what drives the amount of money that the districts get. Am I correct on that? All right. So our October 1 child count and then our January child count adjusted again. So the reality of what that costs you is based on whether a district's enrollment is increasing or declining, and overall whether the state of Louisiana's population is increasing or declining at the K through 12 level. Okay. So what I'm saying to you is, from a practical standpoint, when you make the statement that every teacher is going to get a pay raise, I think you're right, Senator Walsworth. Every teacher is going to get a pay raise, because every superintendent I've talked to, and I know as a superintendent for 15 years, I always had, and it comes out of the general budget when you can't fund it out of the MFP. The districts do that out of their general budget, and they spend 70% of their dollar on instructional things, so there's not a lot of leeway for them. But that's why they need that 1.375, is because it is a continuing obligation for them from then on. We'd be more than happy to take more if you can find another $2 million or whatever. But what I'm saying is, right now, from a practical standpoint, if you pass this out and it gets through the Senate and it gets through, every teacher in Louisiana will get a $1,000 pay raise. Because if they don't, I can tell you there'll be a lot of superintendents unemployed out there, and a lot of school board members unemployed out there, because the expectation is that all teachers are going to get $500 and all support people are going to get, excuse me, teachers are going to get 1,000, support people are going to get 500. Where's Will Centel? That better not be in the paper tomorrow, Will. Oh, you already got it? Okay. But, I mean, that's the point I'm trying to make to you, is that this is all a guess on what it's going to cost us anyway. We do the best we can with it. We put the data there. If there's a little extra money in there, it doesn't really matter in the end because we can't spend what you don't give us, and you don't give it to us unless we can justify what's there. Does that make it clear, or did I muddy it further?
I think what's clear, and my superintendents are the same way. They're saying, look, we're going to have to do that.
Yours is one I talked to.
But we're putting them in the bind because we're putting it in the MFP, and they're going to have to clean up what else is not covered by the MFP. That's not necessarily fair. In most cases, and John, you and I have been in those meetings, which they come back and say that's an unfunded mandate.
Yeah.
Now, it's probably a wink and a grin, but they're not winking and they're not grinning because they know that they've got to pick up the pieces. Now, what I am concerned is what I'm hearing today is that some may have to pick up pieces because they're being honest and coding it correctly, and some may not have to pick up the pieces because they're not coding it correctly. And I think we ought to have an audit that says that the codes, but let me finish. I'm not hearing anything that says this is the code and this says that you will it. This is a code. What I am hearing is that some of the codes, that some districts may be coding them different. And that shouldn't be right. Everybody ought to be coding it the correct way, and the responsibility for those outside of the MFP should be to every district, not just the ones who are coding correctly and not to the ones that are not coding correctly.
But understand, Senator, and you know, you and I have been friends a long time.
Right.
Understand two practical applications. Number one, that coding and so forth was just for the estimating data to put this thing together. It does not in any way obligate the state of Louisiana or the Department of Education to disperse funds based on what was in that code. It was just the data that was used. I regret that I made that statement now. If I could take it back, I would.
That's all right.
But the practical application is, this is no different than any other pay raise you ever did. There's always been people who were not covered in the pay raises that come out of the MFP. There's always been people funded out of other sources like Title I funds and things so forth like that. But there's always been, and there always will be, an understanding that the districts either take it out of the funds that, if they're available within the funds that they are, or take it out of their general fund budget, because they're not going to have any group of teachers who do not get the pay raise. And once that obligation is there, that obligation is continuing forever.
But we shouldn't, I would hope that we would, I think that we should be the ones that come up with the extra $2 million.
Great.
To find that. Because what I'm doing is penalizing you for doing what I would hope that you do, and that is moving that bar as far down. And we want pre-K in our school. We want pre-K by our public school systems. We want that quality pre-K. But I shouldn't have it where all of a sudden I'm penalizing my districts by doing what I want them to do, and that is expanding education. So that's why I don't want to go down that road and say, with that, you're going to get 1.35. Don't worry about it. You'll figure it out. When they have the next board meeting, they're going to, well, maybe we shouldn't be going down this road. You and I know a superintendent who says, I can't keep up with. I don't want to go to pre-K because I have a hard enough time taking care of K through 12. And I got and I understand that with my superintendents. So I don't want to sit there and penalize them because they decided they were going to do what's best for the child, and that's pre-K. And but you and I are on the same page. I just want to make sure that we say, let's go find the $2 million so that we can figure out that every teacher and every support personnel will get something from the state, and not through, hopefully that the districts will do that, because that's unfair to the districts that are doing the right thing.
Well, let me be clear. I came here today hoping to convince you to give us the MFP as we sent it to you. I certainly didn't come here saying that I'd turn down $2 million if you can find it. We want everything we can get for these. But the fact is, what we brought you is what we consider to be the bare minimum that we need to do to get accomplished what you want to get accomplished and to provide for the educational needs of the kids of Louisiana.
That's all.
Thank you, Senator Walsworth. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Before I call on Senator White, I want to make clear for the record that due to budget cuts, we're out of blue cards. And so blue cards are for those who are representing a department or whatnot. So for the record, some of these are white cards, but they may supposed to be blue cards, but we're out of blue cards.
Well, Senator, respectfully, if you'll remind me of that next year, we'll put it in the MFP.
Go down that road.
I won't be there, so you.
Will, you can report that. Senator White for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the last raise was in '08, a state raise.
I think that's when it was, yes, 08.
So that's when we had a $100 million surplus. No, we had $1 billion. We have $100 million this year. So that was the year that we brought the teachers up to the southern regional average.
Right.
That was the year we fully funded higher education.
Right.
And after we did that, we gave them $100 million extra because I was on appropriations. Unfortunately, some of the things that they spent it on I thought wasn't wise. They went out and hired 1,000 new staff, and we've been trying to finance those TOs for 10 years now that they went out and hired that year. So we've been playing catch up, and I know K through 12 needs new teachers, and it's hard to get someone to do it now, especially a quality teacher. But with that, I think I'll be on finance, and we'll be looking at which way we do this and if it stays in, and try to blend it with the House bill. And but I feel pretty good about the teachers getting their $1,000 this year and the staff workers. So with that, I know it's been a long time coming, but I think you know every time we've had a surplus, this body's tried to do as much as they could for the teachers. Sometimes when we have to cut somebody else to do that, we do put it on the locals to do it. And I know some of the locals have given them raise over the years, but I think this is one year that the teachers should feel pretty good that we have a surplus, and then we're going to use that money to give them a raise. It's much needed, and it's a job you have to do because you want to do it. It's not for the money. So, but thank you.
Thank you, Senator White. Senator Mizell for a question.
Thank you. I just want to say, sitting here, it's amazing to me how much vagary we have on each side. We don't know if we've got the money. We don't know how we're going to get it to the people that we want to get it to, but we all know one thing: it's a really good idea. It's a really good idea. And as I sit here, a local school board member who must be watching, and I want to say I got calls on my cell phone from people I don't know, making sure I was on board this today. So you've had widespread support. But my local school board member, in response to Senator Walsworth's question, said, our pre-K and LA4 teachers will receive the same raise as K through 12. That's a district practice for us.
Most districts.
So I think everybody wants the confidence that that's a district practice across the state. That's what we'd like to see.
I know personally every superintendent in the state. I've talked to probably in the last 2 weeks, probably 2/3 of them. As I had emails back and forth with 5 of them yesterday. I have yet to find one, and I specifically ask every one of them, if somebody is not covered in the MFP formula on your staff as a teacher, certified teacher, will they not get the $1,000? And everyone said, however we fund it, it either comes out of our general fund, it comes out of our titled funds, it comes out, but everybody gets the pay raise. So I think you can rest comfortably and say that, yes, if you do this, and if it gets out, and if it makes it through both sides, and you approve it, everyone will get the appropriate pay raise.
Well, I mean, they deserve it, but to keep family harmany, you got to do it.
Well, think about it for a minute. What would happen if you had the opposite? Let's say, for example, that for some reason the district had an early childhood teacher that they employed because they did a special program or whatever.
Right.
What do you think would happen if that teacher didn't get the $1,000 pay raise? What would that teacher want to do? They're going to immediately leave that position and go to a position that is funded
Right.
with the $1,000.
Yeah.
So superintendents don't want to deal with that.
No, it's got to be valued across the board.
Exactly.
It's
So
got to be.
superintendents and board members are going to make sure that everyone receives the appropriate money.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
thank you, Senator Mizell. Thank you for being here, Superintendent White, Mr. Jones. I have cards in support who would like to speak. Larry Carter Jr. from Louisiana Federation of Teachers and Employees, if you'll make your way to the table. Shane Riddle, Louisiana Association of Educators. Michael Falk with the Louisiana Association of School Superintendents. In support and who would like to speak. Mr. Carter.
Sure. I'm going to say good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Larry Carter. I was an elementary school teacher here in Louisiana for 8 years. But I sit here today as president of the Louisiana Federation of Teachers and School Employees, as well as a member of the Louisiana Public Schools Coalition. LFT represents tens of thousands of teachers and support staff across Louisiana, and I'm here on their behalf to urge you to vote yes on the MFP resolution that was unanimously passed by the Bessie Board in March. We need to invest in education. It is really that simple. In order for our state to flourish, to attract new industry, develop new technology, and build a better future for our children, we need thriving public schools. But our schools can't thrive unless they're properly funded. If you choose to increase salaries without increasing the MFP formula in step 1, then you're really cutting into the educators' raises. Teachers and support staff will have to bear the brunt of increases in insurance premiums. They'll have to spend more of their personal hard-earned dollars on school supplies. They'll have to spend more time figuring out how to teach without adequate curriculum or working computers. Teachers and students can't live up to their full potential if their schools are struggling. They need you to invest in their education and their future. Please do the right thing and approve the MFP as it is. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Mr. Riddle.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm Shane Riddle. I'm the Legislative Political Director for the Louisiana Association of Educators. I am here representing our president today. She is unable to be here due to other business outside the state. What I'd like to say is that the professionals working in our schools, they deserve the pay raises, and we must ensure these raises are sustainable so we can reach the average teacher's salaries comparable to that of our neighboring states. Attracting the best and the brightest to the profession with competitive pay is one of the most important investments that we can make for Louisiana students. But it is equally important for us to also invest in our schools. The additional $39 million, we need to make sure that that is also included in the MFP, and we do support that, as did the MFP Task Force and the Bessie Board. I respectfully request that you do the right thing for our teachers and other school system employees, but most importantly for Louisiana's children. Please pass SCR 3, the MFP funding resolution, in its current posture, as it was submitted to you by the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Riddle. Mr. Falk.
Michael Falk with the Louisiana Association of School Superintendents. And for those of you who may be new to the committee or don't know the past history, but the MFP stands for Mike Falk's problem, because been dealing with it since 1992. And Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I'm here to speak on behalf of superintendents from across this state. We worked with Bessie. We worked with the leadership. We agreed that the state does have some financial issues, and that's why we supported unanimously Bessie's resolution to have a 1.375% increase in the per pupil, and that was unanimously adopted. And the reasons for our support has been one increase in the MFP since 2008, and that was in 2014-15, when it was increased 2.75, and 50% went to teacher salaries that you had to incorporate into your teacher salary schedule, and the retirement costs for that. The other 50% went to the districts. Since then, we've had new content standards that have been adopted, new curriculum adopted, and we have had to provide resources for our teachers and additional professional development. State assessments, grades 5 through 8, are now mandated to be online, and we are required to maintain and keep our technology systems up to date to where the online testing can be accomplished. And then health insurance costs have increased. And the thing with teacher salaries and pay raises is you have additional costs because these are incorporated into your total salary figures. And so your retirement costs, your Medicare costs, your unemployment compensation, and your workers' comp are all increased. Therefore, we ask you to support the Bessie MFP resolution that you're considering today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. We have other cards who wish to speak. If you'll give up your seats to Sarah Vandergriff with the Louisiana Association of Public Charter Schools, Belinda Davis with One Community, One School District, and Dr. Janet Pope with the Louisiana School Boards Association. I'm sorry, Senator White. You had a question?
Yes, I just wanted to welcome Mr. Falk in his new endeavor, working on his third retirement. My wife is fixing to retire from her second, and she's had some pretty good jobs, and I keep trying to find her something else, so I'm going to get her to come consult with you and tell her she needs one more job before she quits, okay? But good luck to you. It's good to see you. Mike and I have always had a great understanding when he come to Central, that I had some deep-rooted feelings because of the situations I faced when my children were 5, 6, and 8, and had a choice of sending them to one of 3 of failing schools in this parish. And I told him, I'll do everything I can for you in Central, and you were the best superintendent we could have ever gotten, but I'll never vote to put a child in a failing school. So, and he's always understood that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
I agree. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate your time. Senator Walsworth, wait, whoa. Sit back down, Mike.
He came from up north, and he's coming back home up north, and we want to welcome you back to your home. You do a great job. I hope you understand. I'm fighting for my superintendents. I don't want you to have to get money out of the 1.375 to pay for other teachers. I want to continue to encourage what superintendents are doing, school boards are doing back home, that says we believe in early childhood education, and we're going to put it. So I want to make sure that we do this legally, and I want to find that extra $2 million and make sure that you don't have to take it out of the way, because I think we know that this thing is teetering, and we don't know what's going to happen a month from now to this budget, and I think there's a big elephant in this room that knows that something may have to get cut, and it's probably not going to be teachers.
Senator, I understand that, but I can assure you, sir, that school systems, school districts have teacher salary schedules. And whenever the superintendent crafts that budget and there's a certified teacher, they're going to be paid according to that teacher salary schedule that's within that district.
But I want to make sure that when we make this deal, that we pay for it, and that you don't have to pay for it out of your general fund. That's what I think should be happening with this teacher pay raise and this support personnel, that we know that there's a problem and that we ought to solve it ourselves and get the extra $2 million so it doesn't have to come out of the districts. So that's our deal
That
with
would
you.
be appreciated, sir.
Okay. And thank you. Welcome back home.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Ms. Davis.
Hello, my name is Belinda Davis, and I'm the president of One Community, One School District and the mother of 3 children in the East Baton Rouge Parish Public School System. For over 12 years, I have had a child in Louisiana public schools, and I have watched as the state has demanded more from our students and teachers in terms of testing, while contributing little in the way of additional resources to meet those the rise in expectations. And as a parent in public teacher organizations and PTAs in my kids' schools, I have sold chocolate-covered almonds, candles, poinsettias, wrapping paper, cookie dough, and once some really ugly nature-themed blankets, trying to make up for what the state was not giving our public schools. And I am here to tell you that our teachers deserve a raise and our students deserve more money to be spent in their classroom. But as a professor, I have to say that I spend a lot of time talking to college students about the importance of quality early childhood education and how it can be used to mitigate the adverse childhood experience of growing up in poverty. And so I am thrilled to see that so many of you who voted to cut early childhood dollars under the Jindal administration are committed to restoring those dollars because our kids need it. But that should not be done at the expense of primary and secondary education. A legislature that believes in Louisiana and prioritizes the future of our children funds primary and secondary education and early childhood in the manner in which our children deserve. So I hope you'll do the right thing and vote this MFP proposal out of committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Ms. Vandergrift.
Good evening, or good afternoon, sorry. Sarah Vandergrift, Louisiana, not evening yet. Sometimes we get there. Sarah Vandergrift, Louisiana Association of Public Charter Schools. The Charter School Association will always be on the record supporting and asking lawmakers to support additional funding for schools. However, I would not be doing my job if I did not represent our Executive Director, Caroline Romer, without reiterating the comments we have repeated at both the MFP task force, for which she is a member of, at the State Board of Education meetings, and even 2 weeks ago at the House Ed. We have consistently pleaded with elected officials that schools should be supported annually by the MFP increase of the 2.75. As the conversation is leading today, every time we talk about restricted funds to schools, while well-intentioned, it causes greater complications down the line. I believe Caroline Romer, as part of the MFT task force, was only one of 3 votes that actually recommended a $3,000 pay raise for teachers, because by the time these teachers go through taxes and other costs, the minimum dollars that they're going to get per month, it's going to be minimum. And it actually would take about $3,000 pay raise to have the impact that most people think of in terms of a $1,000 pay raise. However, if you actually supported schools through a general block grant, you free up the systems to make the decisions as close to the students and teachers as possible. Earlier today, I hear from school leaders talking about the increased cost of textbooks, technology, and then another teacher even talking about how recently the governor did the audit of the safety of schools, told them all the ways our schools are not safe, and then, by the way, these schools are now responsible for the fiscal costs of improving security. So consistently, we are demanding a lot from schools, and we're not giving them the general funding that's needed to support them. So we always say to keep in mind, state funding support should be going to school systems in as much of a general block grant as possible. Let them make the decisions, and if the constituents feel that their local districts are not doing right by their teacher or their students, then we hold those local district leaders accountable. So we thank you all for bringing this MFP. We support it. We always support increase, but we will be on the record saying that the general funding per pupil increase is needed just as much as a teacher pay raise. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vandergrift. Dr. Pope.
Good morning. Janet Pope, Louisiana School Boards Association, and I am just here on behalf of school boards to urge you to pass this resolution, and thank you. Thank you for your time, and also to thank Bessie and President Gary Jones for his support and his testimony earlier today. No need to repeat all of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pope. I have 2 other cards. Well, I'm not sure. Mr. Corville, I have 2 cards that you do, one that you do and one you do not. I do. Okay, Keith Corville with Apple and Donald Sanjay with the governor's office, and Melanie Bruffin with the Louisiana Policy Institute. This is Mr. Sanjay's card. It's blue. Let the record reflect. This is a blue card. He's with the governor's office. And Mr. Corville, you did wish to speak. I'm going to.
Thank you.
This is the card where he didn't want to speed to destroy that one. Mr. Corville.
Thank you. Dr. Keith Corville, Executive Director of the Associated Professional Educators, Louisiana. Y'all know I always pride myself on keeping myself short. So one, thank y'all. Please pass it. Let's keep this moving through the committee because time's running out and everything in legislative session, so let's keep it moving. And also, of course, on the record that we've still got years, almost actually a little over a decade, to catch up on school funding. So let's keep doing this. Let's keep doing this every single year. Thank y'all for y'all time today. Keep it moving.
Thank you, Mr. Corville. Ms. Bronfman.
Hi, Melanie Bronfman with the Louisiana Policy Institute for Children, and I had not planned to testify today. I put in a white card because it's truly not specifically about the MFP, but that said, there's been so much discussion about early childhood, I felt like I had to speak. First, to thank you all, to thank Senator Wadsworth for his defense of the pre-K teachers, and I know our superintendents have been wonderful about supporting them and trying to keep them as part of their entire faculty, and those sentiments all are so much appreciated. I just felt like we used the words early childhood education as though it's all the same thing here, and I just had to take a moment and clarify. None of this is about the early care and education of birth through age 3, which I hope everyone here has learned is the most important time of brain development. And if we spend money, definitely as we should, to increase the salary of our pre-K teachers, we must remember that our childcare teachers are earning $8.95 an hour. Teaching children at the time that is the most important time for brain development, and if it is babysitting, it should not be, because then we are missing an incredible opportunity to have children starting kindergarten on time and not having to spend the money in K through 12 to catch them up. And so this is not about the MFP passing or not, or the money in it or not. We should, as a state, be putting, as far as I'm concerned, all of our money in education. That's the way we'll get out of poverty and get out of this situation we're in. But I just felt a need to clarify early care and education, it's pre-K, but we say that as though we take care of the pre-K teachers and all as well. No, we have a huge issue with birth to 3. This is not about that. And frankly, the funding for that is currently not in any budget. And all we've done is cut it for the last 10 years. So I know this isn't about us today, but I just felt with all the discussion about early childhood, I had to give voice to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bronfman. And as you know, there's no one on this panel that doesn't agree that early childhood is very important. We will work with you through this process to see if we
Thank
can
you.
increase
Appreciate
funding. Mr. Sanji.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. First of all, I want to thank you for, I get accused often by my wife of being colorblind, but the fact that that is a blue card, the Senate Education Committee confirms that I'm not. I'm Education Policy Advisor for Governor John Bell Edwards, and he, for the first time in his tenure, is dealing with a budget that is not a deficit budget, that is not a fiscal cliff. He actually has some funding to work with to address some of his priorities. And he has made definitely the priority of elementary and secondary education in that budget. That's why he proposed an MFP that would include that $1,000 pay raise for teachers and certificated employees, $500 for support employees, which, by the way, includes a portion of that funding. It goes to pay down, to pay the teacher retirement obligation of the district. So that's included in that. And then the 1.375% increase in the per pupil, which is equally important because, as Mr. Falk so eloquently said, there have been so many increases in both the cost of what they were doing and then new activities that they've got to make. The fact that for 10 years you've had only one increase in the MFP per pupil, districts are struggling. If you don't believe that, just talk to your local superintendents, your local business managers. They will tell you the challenges that they have in trying to produce a budget that adequately addresses the needs of our children. So for that reason, the governor has proposed and strongly supports the MFP, which includes the teacher pay raises and the 1.375% increase in the per pupil.
Thank you, Mr. Sanji. Members of the board is clear. I have no red cards. I do have other cards who are in support but who do not wish to speak. Eva Kemp with the Democrats for Education Reform, Heather Cushman with LFT, Eric Sundstrom with the School Nutrition Association of Louisiana, Susan East Nelson with the Louisiana Partnership for Children and Families, Lee Fawcett, Louisiana Association of School Executives, Devontae Lewis with the Louisiana Budget Project, Dr. Marky Pierre with the Louisiana School Boards Association, Sandra Franklin, who represents herself, Dr. Keith Leje, a Council for a Better Louisiana, Tanya Nyman, who represents herself, hope I got that right, Tanya, and Shan Davis with Bessie. The board is clear. Senator Appel, you had a question?
I would like to speak to Mr. Ducey. Mr. Ducey.
Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Appel would like Mr. Ducey to come to the table. Mr. Ducey is with the Division of Administration, Office of Planning and Budget, and this may be a blue card, I'm not sure.
Blue.
Barry Ducey with the State Budget Office.
How you doing? Good morning, I guess. It's still morning. Were you here when I was talking before?
No, sir.
Okay.
I was told that there were questions regarding the
There are.
budget, and
Yeah.
so I was asked to attend.
As I appreciate the governor's, I won't call it a budget, whatever the proposal was that went to the House, had this MFP funding in it. So that's covered, right?
The 1.375?
Yeah, both elements, the teacher
Both
pay
elements.
raise. Yeah.
Yes, sir, both the proposed budget and the amendments to Representative or Chairman Henry's bill, HB 105.
What amendments are those?
The amendments to HB 105, that's Chairman Henry's bill.
Mm-hmm.
And we have submitted amendments to include the 1.375%.
Okay. And that was after the REC meeting. So the 20 million shortfall between what was expected and what was finally developed was covered by that. So that's covered.
Correct.
In what's been said. Now,
it is.
They have said, and I'm reading from the fiscal note, that 105 has a $38.9 million shortfall. And can you explain that? I have not talked to them. I don't know what that is. But it's on the fiscal note. It says HB 105 does not include $38.9 million required to fund the 1.375 base per pupil amount increase. Do you know what that is?
Well, in the original submission by Chairman Henry of HB 105, he did not include the 1.375.
Okay, so it's out.
It is out in the
But his
original
budget would have,
bill.
his submission of HB 105 would have spent every penny of what the REC recognized. He didn't leave any extra money laying around, did he?
No, he still has to spend the increase in the Revenue Estimating Conference.
Say it again, I'm sorry.
His original bill was filed before the Revenue Estimating Conference.
Which went down 20 million. The original estimate was 20 million higher. The original expectation was 20 million higher than the Revenue Estimating Conference.
There was the governor's proposed budget,
right,
which presumed a higher revenue estimating conference.
That's the expectation I was talking
That's
about.
correct. And that was submitted as HB 103 by Representative Leger.
Leger.
And that one does include the 1.375%.
I'm just trying to get to why the fiscal office indicates there's a 38.5 million differential between HB 105 and... She's here. Okay, she's here. And then the second point was that the governor has now come out and stated that he wanted to fund $8.8 million for early childhood to make up for the lost federal money, plus $13 million for some additional early childhood, which is $22 million. So where is that coming from?
We have submitted amendments to both replace the, to include the $39 million for the 1.375%. And to include the $8.8 million.
And so, what would those? What would we not fund in Henry's budget, 105, to make up for that amount of money. Something had to be cut. I mean,
There's additional savings in the Department of Health, in which we made those reductions. There's also additional cuts of about $15 million to other agencies.
okay. Well, we'll hear that in finance, I'm sure.
You will. We did submit the amendments to appropriations.
We haven't seen them yet. So could you?
Jody Moroner, Legislative Fiscal Office. The fiscal note identifies the resolution as filed, the funding requirements of the resolution as filed.
Right.
And as an anecdotal note, it recognized that the House Bill 105 that was filed by Chairman Henry did not contain the $38 million increase. The governor's proposed budget was premised on the revenue forecast that had not been adopted, but had been, there was a motion and a vote by 3 of the members to adopt
was the
that
$20
forecast.
million
That was a $134.5 million increase for FY20. That forecast was not adopted. The governor's proposed budget incorporated that $134.5 million into his proposed budget. Chairman Henry's bill, House Bill 105, reduced the total amount of general fund by $134.5 million. And the way they did that was they went in and they effectively eliminated all the general fund increases in each department. And so it wasn't clear what was being reduced, with the exception of the increased funding for the MFP. That was $101 million for the teacher pay raise. There were some other smaller adjustments, means of finance substitutions. Those were not removed. They left that in, but they took out precisely the $38.5 million that was associated with the 1.375% increase.
So the bill that could potentially come from the House would be $38.5 million short.
So now we are in a situation where we have an official REC forecast of $119 million for next year. And on Monday, the Appropriations Committee will consider the bill. They will consider amendments that are being proposed by the governor's office, and they will consider amendments that are being proposed by committee members and by the chairman. Those amendments will address the $119 million additional revenue that they have to spend. It will also reprioritize funding based on what that committee identifies as a need. It may or may not include the $38 million. I can't answer that. I know that Ms. Landry in the House Education Committee returned the MFP formula, so I can't say what the House committee will do if this bill, this resolution is passed out of this committee today. Will they fund it? Will they add that money to the budget? That's possible.
Well, in the Senate,
They
of
might-
course,
they
Finance
might
could
not.
fund
Yeah,
it.
so
But
there's-
that
there's-
wouldn't be until the very end of the session, practically.
I'm sorry?
I say if the Senate Finance Committee decided to do that, we all know that probably won't be the very end of the session. That's the problem. It's a timing problem. In other words, if we decided to move some funds around in finance, and by the time it goes through the Senate floor process and over to the House for concurrence and then back for conference, the clock's running.
That's how the process works, though, and it's
I
always on
understand
that
that's how the process
timeline.
works, but we also have Bessie out there. And
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just answering the question about
I appreciate
how
that.
the process
That's all I was
works, yeah,
asking,
yeah.
and so we'll see Monday, I guess, what the results of the amendments that you guys have offered.
Correct, and one of the amendments to spend the $120 million is for the $39 million for the 1.375%.
And what about this early childhood piece? Is that in there too?
We have also submitted for that. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Senator Walsworth.
Don't go anywhere. $2 million for the teachers that are outside the MFP. I'm assuming that's not necessarily y'all's in your,
No, sir, that is not in our set.
but it will be by the time you get to Monday. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator Walsworth. The board is clear. There are no cards in opposition. Ladies and gentlemen, I could spend a lot of time closing on this legislation, but I'm not. I want to thank all of those who testified today. There's absolutely no doubt that timing is an issue here. I see former representative and former senator and to Chabert and Ellington, and when we've worked till 3 or 4 in the morning, and we certainly have the capability to do that. And for $54 per student in Louisiana, I'm willing to do it and I'm ready to do it. And so I would move favorable on SCR number 3.
Yes, I got to object.
Senator Appel objects. Ms. Richard, call the roll.
Senator Morrish?
Yes.
Yes. Senator Milkovich? Yes. Yes. Senator Appel? No. Senator Boudreaux? Yes. Yes. Senator Mizell? Yes. Yes. Senator Walsworth?
Yes.
Yes. Senator White?
Yes.
Yes. 6 yeas,
White
1
is
nay.
still here? Oh, there, yeah. Senator Appel, would you like to? Well, first, let me take care of business. So, members, SCR number 3 will be reported favorably. Senator Appel, well,
I just want to make
quick, go ahead.
Quick. I just want to make a statement. My no vote was not on the basis of the funding formula or the methodology. It's strictly on the basis of concern that this is a very complex problem that we could end up with no teacher pay raise, or at least maybe it would be an appropriation or something. But I have a strong concern about us passing this resolution today. I'd rather see Bessie correct it tomorrow, at least align it closer to the House, and then we might have a more stronger comfort level. But that's the reason for my vote. So thank you.
I understand, Senator Appel, and we can talk about that all day long, but we're not